Well, I've got a little bit of a different session. You guys can feel free to be seated for you today. While they're rearranging on stage, I just want to start with a question for you guys. Have you ever gotten to the point where you just feel overloaded, spent, depleted? I'm sure all of us have. Some of us are probably at that point right now. I want you to think about that situation and stick that on the back burner for a second. We'll come back to that later. The main goal of this session is to kind of do two things for you. Number one, I want to make it known that you guys are not alone. And number two, that God loves you and cares for you. Because of this, or because I want you guys to know that you're not alone, I'm going to invite two guest speakers up on stage with me. They just got to the back of the room. I'm going to call them up front now. We're going to kind of set up on stage, and we're going to have a little bit of a discussion on the topic that we are calling Reclaim Direction. So pull up a chair, Steve and Kelly.
You want to get this?
So I got two fantastic testimonies for you. I want you to keep in mind when you're listening to these that I didn't have these guys talk beforehand. I didn't have these guys come up with, hey, this is the perfect thing or whatever. This kind of just came about. I have Steve Branson, you met him, and Kelly Burns.
Hello.
Yeah.
Huh? Oh, yeah. It's all right.
And Steve, let's go ahead and start with you. So you've got an interesting story that comes from a non-believer's perspective of what it is to find faith.
Yeah. For me, it was one of those where, and this is the hard part, a lot of times when people meet me, I'll hear comments of, oh, let me do this real quick, because I have an audio engineer right here sitting next to me, actually a couple that will swat me if I don't do this. It was a situation where, I'll talk to people and some people will say, oh yeah, you know what it was like growing up in the church. And I lived for years with sort of embarrassment of that, of just, I didn't really. I can think, on sort of one hand, the times where I went to church. And one time, a friend and I, we both knocked out the screen on the third floor of the church and threw all the papers out in the front yard. The next time we chewed gum and threw it down on the pews so people would sit in it. It was one of those where when I was there, it was kind of like, how am I going to entertain myself? I don't really, maybe this isn't for me, but my mom and dad are dragging me. I was the last of 4 kids by 12 years, and I think that the first 3, I'm going to blame it on them. They wore them out. And by the time I came around, the statistics say I was the wildest one of all of us. So it wasn't until much later, when I got older, that I started seeing where God was placing me in certain situations. And not only did I not realize it, there were a lot of times where people would say, my mom was always, Stephen, we need to get you there. We need to do this. We need to do that. And I came from a perspective of, I have all of these authoritative figures in my life. Why would I add another one? Why would I put God in there? Because by what I hear, it's another authority telling me I can't do. So at a young age, I grew up with a mindset of, I'm not really interested. And not actually until adulthood. I won't hog all the time. I know you have other questions.
Yeah, no, that's great. And Kelly, I'm going to turn things over to you now. Similar situation, but from a just different perspective. So you've been a believer for a while,
Yeah.
and then your thing became work.
Yes. It was, grew up a lot with, insecurity stuff. But work, it was, so I got into people, it did fall off. So, and that's the end.
Have you tried plugging it in?
No,
Yeah.
I am up here because I'm the trouble child. So I just, work drove me, people pleasing is the core root of my issues. And I had gone through 12-step at another church for that. It was great. It started me on the path, but then I got into work. And I got so paranoid I was going to lose my job. what was that gonna do? I worked till 12:30 several nights a week, away from family. I did this for about 3 years, and I blame this on Andy as well, because it started right at the church building process. I got used to working all day long. No. But it just became so much that I completely forgot about God. There was no time for him. And thanks to a good friend who's sitting right here, he just said, you got to just do something. And that was, I mean, you hear it all the time about the power in the Word and spending time in prayer, but it's such a cliche. Everybody, I think, just lets that go out. But as soon as I started doing that, it was just amazing. I was listening on my hour drive to work to podcasts and different things, and I would pick up for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then I may drift a little bit, but I knew it was okay, and I was just getting stuff in. And man, within 2-3 weeks, I just lost all of this stuff that I always wanted this switch for to turn off. And it was really all about the Word. And it's still weird to say it because it's a common, there's power in the Word, power in prayer, power in spending time with God. And yeah, there is.
Yeah.
And now I feel it. It really, it's just gone. It's like a miracle from a drug addiction or something, because it was an addiction.
Yeah, I think both of you made such a great point that, Steve, you said, I don't need another person in my life telling me not to do something. I think we get so stuck on this model of problem, fix, solution. If we focus our resources on this issue, pleasing people, making it through life, or self-satisfaction or whatever, if we put resources into that, we'll eventually solve it. And that's, although not how that really works, is it? You eventually run out of something. If it's time, if it's money, whatever, we're finite. That eventually depletes itself, and all of a sudden we don't have a way to do anything about that. We're stuck. The hardest part is that God has given us a solution. I'll have John put this up on screen, but Matthew 6:33 says, "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be provided for you." Now, if you read that in context, the verses before it are saying food, shelter, whatever, God's going to provide that for us if we seek him first. Yet, let's be real here, that seems a lot easier on paper than it does in real life. Why would I pull away resources from trying not to get fired at work or trying to meet my own goals to do something that seems so counterproductive to that? And we get so focused on that we forget that God's a little different. Our logic's flawed. This is what God has to say about that logic. He says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways are not your ways." This is the Lord's declaration. "For as heaven is higher than earth, so my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts." When you think about that, it seems contradictory. Why would I invest resources into following God, to setting time aside to read his word, to pray, to come to a men's retreat, when I have all these other things begging for my attention, but God's saying that no, that's just not the case.
Yeah, kind of to add to that, there was a time I moved to Nashville. What do a lot of people move to Nashville for? Music. And it was one of those things, okay, well, where do I need to go to get in the music scene? And I found myself basically Lower Broadway in Nashville, 2nd Avenue, you name it, I probably played it. And there was this motivation all the time of, okay, I have to go here, and the goals were laid out. It was really clear. You need to get people to drink and party. If they drink and they party, then they have a good time, we make money. If we make money, we'll have you back. In my mind also, going through, okay, I need to pay bills, so this needs to be just a blowout party. This needs to be really big. And that was the goal each night. And it was, taking years off my life. The more you're around a scene, the more you become the scene. I'd just been married. My wife was working night shift. I was going to meet her at, 2 and 3 in the morning when I was getting done playing and having lunch with her. then going home, having to get up and try to do work too. And I was chasing. And I had goals in mind. And I thought, okay, and honestly, if it's whether it be chasing money, whether it be chasing whatever it is, in this case for me it was music. And I was chasing it like crazy. And I had certain goals. And when one of those goals got met, I'm like, bam, got it. Doesn't feel right. Okay, but there's this here. Okay, now I'm going to go after that goal. Okay, got it? Okay, doesn't feel right. Or there would be a sliver of happiness in there, satisfaction. And this went on and on and on for quite a while. Then I was sitting in church one day, and it had already been to a point, my wife, if you've never met her, she is an amazing woman. She literally said, "You gonna marry me? You're coming here. You're gonna go with me. You're going to be engulfed in this." Kicking and screaming, just because, again, that authority. Why would I? That's good for you. Same thing I would tell my mom. That's good for you. It doesn't really fit into my agenda, what I have going on. Even before she passed, she said, "One day I pray that you will use your gifts to glorify God." And I kind of laughed at it. I was kind of like, again, cool for some, may not be my path. And I was sitting in church one day. I was actually serving in children's ministry. So maybe that was God's way of just loosening me up, getting some blows where I'm like, whoo, okay, we're in the grind now. And I saw a worship leader there, and I saw that he was tired. I saw this going on. Now, at this time, I was still going and playing in different places. It had calmed down a little bit, but I was, still doing the songwriting, still doing everything. And all of a sudden, it was like God just took the biggest boot ever and kicked me in the butt. And it went through my wife. And she just looked at me. She goes, "I think you're supposed to start playing music in church and using your gifts to glorify God." And it was like this whole history of people telling me that in my ear. And it was without a doubt, I looked at her and I said, "I know." And it was strange. It was really strange. And I was scared to death because, wait, this is the way that I've always thought, but this is what God's leading me on. I think. It's kind of new to this, but okay, I'll try it out. And then they said, "You have to audition." It was at a different church. They said, "You have to audition. Here's the song you have to audition with." And I went home and I told Christy, I asked my friends, I was like, "What do you do with this whole worship stuff? What is it?" They said, "Look up U2 and Chris Tomlin. You're going to be cool." I was like, I love Chris. I don't know Chris Tomlin. I love U2. Sounds great. And I went home and I practiced this song. And I can tell you at that moment, I was standing in my living room in front of the fireplace. TV was going on. I don't remember what was going on there. But for once, I felt satisfaction. It didn't make sense because later on people would tell me, "Oh, so you gave up the whole music thing, did you? You gave it up." I went back home. I was afraid to tell people. So I'm like, "No, they're not going to get this. They're going to think I found the peyote or something. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to respond." I was scared to tell people. But then I said, "You gave up," and all of a sudden it was just like it hit me. Nope, I figured it out. I figured out I had been chasing the wrong thing this whole time. I've been using this wrong the whole time. This is something God could take away in a minute, but for some reason he said, "This is the resource I'm giving you. This is the resource I'm giving you," and it had purpose for the first time. I found that peace, I found that happiness, and it was about worshiping God. It wasn't about me, and that was really the first time at that moment right there. It wasn't about me. And it completely changed.
Wow. And so, once again, two separate stories, but you're going to notice the recurring themes here. And Kelly, let's talk about your relationship with a CEO that's going to go unnamed for the purpose of the recording.
Yeah.
I know you've come to me so many times saying, I don't know what to do to please this guy. I don't know what to do to get fulfillment in that area.
Yeah, it's crazy. This company that we had kind of started together, me and this guy were the fourth and fifth hire. We came in as a team. We were installers together, just doing this thing. We were really good buddies. And as things progressed, he got to be CEO. There was no jealousy there. I'm not a CEO mind. But things started just drifting. And then I started going, man, I seen him move his brother out of a position twice. because he wasn't doing a good enough job. I saw him do another friend that same way in this company, and I'm like, okay, so I'll be next. I'm uneducated. Everything I'm doing is self-taught, and the paranoia just started, which was easy for the enemy because I'm wide open to that. And through this last change, it got to a point of reorg, and thankfully I'd called Bart the next morning, and he had great advice for me, which started this whole this snowball of starting the new routine. And coupled with that, my worries started just daily dissipating.
But I think the thing I want to bring up is I know we had conversations where you were fixated that this other person was the problem. This other person was causing all these issues, but that just wasn't the case.
No, it wasn't. It was what happened?
Oh.
Battery? Okay. Yeah, it was all me. Like, God broke me down to one night at home was the breaking point. I was so afraid, scared, overtired, everything. I broke down in a little ball in one tiny little hallway in our house with everybody around, my family. My wife was on the floor crying. I was curled up crying to where I thought I was going to pop a blood vessel. My kids came in. My daughter hugged me and started crying. It was just a mess. I went outside. I was so upset, and I just said, "Where are you?" I was so mad. I just shouted in the dark Spring Hill night, and it echoed through the neighborhood. And that, again, it was just, I think that God enjoyed me saying, okay, you're finally giving up, aren't you? Let me take this. You can't do any of this stuff. So this is all, I feel like everything I'm saying is a cliche, but I'm telling you, I challenge you to start some routine where God is in it. If it's 10 minutes a day, you'll notice something in 2 weeks. You'll notice something in a week, maybe. I don't know. But
Yeah.
you've got, he just broke me to where it wasn't Jason. I can say his name. And we are back. He is back to, he's not a hugger, but he's back to hugging me. He's just, it's really cool to see the healing just go through everything. And it sounds sappy, but it's true. And if anybody knows me here, I had once mentioned to Andy, I'm so sick of this, I want to get hypnotized. I want to know something. What's the switch to turn this off? I don't want to care about what people think. I want to care about, what my purpose is, and for God's glory. And so the switch was that. It was a breaking point, but
Yeah. One of the misconceptions I do want to dispel real quick, because you mentioned it is cliche. God's going to fix everything for us. Well, that doesn't mean that all the problems are just going to magically go away. One of the verses, we're told in the Bible, one who's righteous has many adversaries. Some translations will replace the word adversities with afflictions. So here's the full verse. One who's righteous has many adversities, but the Lord rescues him from them all. God doesn't promise us a life free of trouble. No, he promises the exact opposite. He promises us, however, that he will take up our burdens for us. Matthew 11:28 says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take up my yoke and learn from me, because I am lowly and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." What's really interesting about that verse is that it doesn't say that he's going to take our yoke away. It doesn't say that he's going to take our effort, our problems, all that, and get rid of them. He just says he's going to give us a yoke that's easy and a burden that's light. He is going to come alongside us and not necessarily do it for us.
I want to add real quickly, sorry, Chris. I want to add that the workload and stuff is basically still the same. Not much has changed there. It's just different. I'm not absorbing it. I can leave and let it be, and my thought is, if I do get fired,
God's got this.
God's got it. I'm not worried anymore, and it's such a freeing feeling. I think, yeah, I wish those that know me here could say, "Oh yeah, this guy's a freak." He was way off, and it's just different. I love it.
Yeah, it is incredibly freeing. And you mentioned the workload didn't necessarily change, and I think, Steve, you probably have something similar to say, that the things you were, the need for fulfillment and stuff like that didn't change. But it was different in every way.
Yeah, the direction changed. It was weird because, being in some of the environments that I was in, it becomes it's commonplace, it's normal. I had a job where I kind of made my schedule to where I could fish and go play music at night. I know it was kind of rough, and again, my wife kind of pulled me out of it and said, "Buddy, you need to come on, man." But it was one of those to where, I don't know if you would call it an addiction or what, but I was very drawn to it. Very drawn to it. But then it got to a point, again, when that first time I ever even practiced a song and I had to think about, why am I doing this? That taste for doing what I had done all those years up to that point, it went away. I tried it again and I was like, man, what's the purpose of this? Why am what I used to do before that I had done since I was a little kid playing music and all the reasons why I did it, and how it transformed into something that was to me now I look back, a lot darker. All of a sudden it was like, whoa, you're not going to find any satisfaction in that anymore, because now you see purpose in what you do and why I gave you this thing. And it wasn't easy. There was even part of me that when I made that switch, again, like I said before, what are people going to think? This is such an absolute now. It's such a strong feeling. Some people, and it did. It went back to that. It kind of scared. Even one of the first times I led worship, I'm glad God set it up because I wasn't supposed to lead that day. I was playing guitar, and the worship leader he hadn't led for a while. He and his wife drove off campus, and all of a sudden I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, where's Tom? Where is Tom? He counts down, 1 minute left. I was like, Tom, you better get here. All of a sudden in my ears, Branson, you're leading worship today. And I was freaking out. Everything was running through my head. What if during communion I say, let's do a holler and swaller? I don't know, tip the ushers when they come by. I mean, it was all these different things. I'm like, I know what I'm used to. This is really freaking me out. God, what are you doing? What are you doing? But it was weird. It was just kind of like, I got you, buddy. I got you. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Again, at that moment, kids ministry, I was like, okay, I'm safe here. This is a whole nother life for me, that what's going to happen when I start using this to serve God. Because all of us out there have something unique, very unique. Now, some people would say, like I was talking to Roger up here, it would be easy to say, well, yeah, Clyde, yours is music. That's easy. At church we do music. But trust me, there's a man sitting here. There is somebody in your life right now that something God has blessed you with. You are supposed to use that as that connection. One of the biggest people that ever ministered to me was someone that wrote music. And everything I'd written up to that point was stuff for country. We had done stuff for some television shows, stuff like that. And he goes, hey, man, I'm doing a new album. I like your writing. Let's write together. And I'm thinking, well, I can write about parties and bars and stuff like that. What do you want to write? And he goes, no, just sit with me. That was something where God had given this gift, but I didn't use that aspect of it towards something else. But there was a man that was brave enough to come up to me and say, hey, man, I want you to use that gift alongside me. Let's do this together. And it was one of those, I was a little scared because I'm like, okay, and now I've really got to dive into the word here. I better know what we're saying. And it just started changing. All these things that, again, I kept so separate from God. And something that before, I was, again, almost ashamed. It's like that was a part of my life. Like I was playing songs over here last night, and Kelly was like, how do you know all these songs? And I was like, different life. Totally. But, again, it's something like I told Barry earlier on this week. I don't want this to be confused with anything that's like, hey, man, God pulled me out. Look what I did. This is God's story, and he's just using me as a paintbrush. So from here on out, however he wants to paint it, I need to be open to that, whatever it may be. Some of you guys have gifting in leadership. that you don't even realize. Maybe that's your gift, and that's what you're supposed to do, to lead other men or other people around you. Lead our families. We're all called to do that. So all of us have something. And sometimes, like in my case, I kept it separate from what God actually, why he gave it to me.
Awesome. Well, we're starting to run a little short on time, so I'm going to start to land this plane a bit. But remember at the beginning of the session, I asked you guys to think of that one situation that it may be right now, it could be something that's happened, it could be something that's about to happen that has you feeling overwhelmed. Now I want you to think about God. He created the entire visible, known universe and more. The same God that is the God of things like neutron stars and black holes is also the God that created us, that chose to love us, that chose to send his son for us. He's also the same God that tells us this: trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not rely on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Proverbs 3:5-7 tells us. God is so powerful on a massive scale. Yet he cares about us at an individual level. You know, as you heard from all three of us, that we all have experiences where God specifically worked in our lives. And I'll say this isn't just for us on stage. This is for you guys. This is for your families. This is for anyone who is willing to turn and say, I can't do this anymore. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you." This is the Lord's declaration. Plans for your well-being, not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. It's worth noting that God said this to Jeremiah. Jeremiah's life was not a life of prosperity exactly. He lived in a great time of unrest. There's a lot of sin in Israel, and God basically told Jeremiah, you're going to go out and tell all these people that they're sinning and that they need to turn and repent. And that wasn't very well received most of the time. So there were people in authority that didn't like him. He had friends that turned on him. And at one point he writes this: "For whenever I speak, I cry out, I proclaim violence and destruction. So the word of the Lord has become my constant disgrace and derision. I say I won't mention him or speak any longer in his name, but his message becomes a burning in my heart, shut up in my bones. I become tired of holding it in, and I cannot prevail." It's incredible that we go from almost a moment like you described, Kelly, of in the backyard just screaming, God, where are you? To later on in that passage, Jeremiah writes, "Sing to the Lord, praise the Lord, for he rescues the life of the needy from evil people." I can't imagine in that same passage that things would have just magically flipped. I think a perspective was changed in a very divine way. And I think that's something that doesn't necessarily make sense to us, that we go from complete despair to worship like that. But that's because God's ways aren't our ways. That's because God is a God of the supernatural, of the universe, of a God who sacrificed his son, who actually gave something of value for us. Matthew 10:28 says, "Don't fear those who kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul. Rather, fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Aren't 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them falls to the ground without your Father's consent. But even the hairs of your head have been counted. So don't be afraid. We're worth more than many sparrows." It's once again incredible to think this massive, incredibly powerful, incomprehensible God knows how many hairs
That I
I
have.
have or Kelly doesn't have.
I was waiting for it. I was going to say,
And the length of each one. Is also the God that chooses to listen to us, that chooses to relate to us. As we move on, I want to let you guys continue the discussion in your small groups. We're going to let the band come up and do another song. But I want you guys to just be thinking of that, thinking of how amazing it is that the God of the universe doesn't ask us to hide our struggles and troubles. He does the exact opposite. He says, bring those to me. Tell me. And he's listening.
And I wanted to add too, in a place like this, I mentioned a lot of names that helped me through these things. That's what can happen here. Don't think that, the musicians, you can't talk to them because they're different people, especially Steve. But, just get all that stuff out of the way and you can develop some much needed assistance in some of those. God speaks through them. And without that, if I'd have done that whole path that I just told you alone without talking to any human being, I'd still be stuck in the rut, I think.
Yeah.
It would be much harder.
And one thing I do want to say, so any of the leaders you see up on stage, any of the speakers, feel free to grab us at any time. We are here for you this weekend. We are happy to share with you. We're happy to pray with you. Heck, grab the person next to you. We're all family here.